The United States Senate formally voted on presidential war powers. That fact is undisputed. The vote occurred because U.S. military force was initiated without clear congressional authorization. That sequence matters. The Constitution assigns war initiation to Congress. It does so deliberately. When force is used first and explained later, institutional balance is strained. This is not a question of policy preference. It is a question of process. Law governs sequence. Sequence governs accountability. Accountability governs legitimacy. The issue is not whether presidents can act quickly. They can. The issue is whether explanation and authorization remain required afterward. When legal justification is withheld, oversight is impaired. When oversight is impaired, consent becomes symbolic. That creates systemic risk, not dramatic risk, structural risk, the kind that accumulates quietly, one action at a time, one unanswered question at a time. Congress responded through procedure, not rhetoric, through a statutory mechanism designed for restraint. The response did not stop operations. It exposed tension between execution and authorization, between urgency and consent, between unilateral action and collective approval. That tension is where the conflict now resides. It begins with a challenge to war powers. War powers challenge. The Senate vote activated a rarely used legislative mechanism. It signaled institutional concern over unilateral force. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 was the operative framework. Its purpose is procedural restraint, not policy judgment. The action focused on authorization, duration, and scope. Senators questioned whether hostilities had exceeded defensive thresholds. The executive branch did not provide a clear legal theory. No formal AUMF citation was offered. No imminent threat justification was articulated. This absence shifted the burden back to Congress. The vote reflected anxiety about precedent. If force can be initiated without explanation, oversight weakens. The challenge was not symbolic, it was structural. It tested whether Congress can still intervene after deployment. It tested whether consultation is optional. The narrow margin showed division, not consensus. Yet bipartisan participation altered expectations. It demonstrated that war powers disputes remain live. It reasserted that silence from the executive creates institutional risk. The episode revived unresolved constitutional tension. Commander-in-Chief authority met statutory constraint. The outcome remained uncertain. The process itself became the signal. Congressional authorization dispute. The dispute centered on process, not ideology. Article 1 authority was explicitly invoked. Senators sought clarification before continuation. Authorization was framed as a prerequisite, not a barrier. The executive bypassed pre-action consultation. Post-action explanation was not provided. Questions concerned legality, scope, and duration. Funding implications were left undefined. Civil governance responsibilities were unclear. Oversight requires information. Information was withheld. The justification cited operational secrecy. Existing classified channels were not utilized. This elevated the conflict. Authorization became a proxy for accountability. Without authorization, Congress retains leverage through appropriations, hearings, and conditions. The failed resolution did not resolve the dispute. It deferred it. Party pressure altered outcomes. Institutional authority remained contested. The disagreement exposed limits of enforcement. It showed how authorization disputes persist after action begins. It underscored how executive initiative reshapes balance. The absence of consent did not halt operations. It intensified scrutiny. It formalized a constitutional disagreement still active: unilateral military action. Force was initiated without prior legislative authorization. The decision path remained confined to the executive branch. No formal request was transmitted to Congress. No emergency declaration was articulated. The action proceeded before consent. This altered the constitutional sequence. Authorization followed action, not the reverse. That sequence matters. It reallocates decision power. It compresses deliberation. It limits intervention windows. Once forces are engaged, withdrawal carries cost, political, strategic, institutional. Unilateral initiation creates momentum. Momentum constrains oversight. The legal framework anticipates consultation. Consultation did not occur. The absence of advance notice reduced congressional leverage. It shifted debate to aftermath. It reframed restraint as interference. This dynamic favors executive primacy. It narrows legislative choice. Approve or risk disruption. The structure incentivizes silence. It discourages early challenge. The result is asymmetry. One branch acts, the other reacts. Over time, this pattern normalizes. Authority expands through repetition. The immediate issue becomes secondary. The procedural precedent becomes central. Oversight refusal. Oversight depends on access. Access depends on cooperation. Cooperation was not provided. Questions were posed formally. Responses were withheld. Legal justification was not clarified. Strategic objectives were not disclosed. Oversight mechanisms stalled. Committees lacked baseline information. Hearings lacked substance. Debate lacked reference points. Refusal reshaped accountability. It transformed inquiry into confrontation. The executive framed questions as illegitimate. That framing discouraged engagement. It elevated conflict. It reduced transparency. Classified briefings could have been used. They were not emphasized. The refusal limited institutional memory. Records remained incomplete. Precedent accumulated quietly. Oversight without enforcement weakens. Silence becomes strategy. Delay becomes protection. This recalibrates power. The legislature depends on norms. Norms require reciprocity. Reciprocity failed. The imbalance persisted. The oversight function remained formally intact, practically constrained. Separation of powers stress test. The episode tested institutional boundaries. It measured enforcement capacity. It exposed dependency on norms. The Constitution separates authority deliberately. Execution and authorization are divided. That division requires cooperation. When cooperation fails, friction emerges. The Senate action reflected institutional strain, not policy disagreement, structural concern. One branch acted first, the other reacted later. That sequence weakened balance. Oversight tools lag operational reality. Information asymmetry intensified pressure. Silence amplified executive discretion. Legislative response became procedural. Votes replaced consultation. Pressure replaced deliberation. Party alignment complicated enforcement. Institutional loyalty competed with partisan loyalty. The stress was visible, not catastrophic, but cumulative. Each unresolved test alters equilibrium. The system bends before it breaks. Stress tests reveal fault lines. They do not resolve them. The episode joined a pattern. Executive initiative, legislative hesitation, judicial absence. Balance depends on resistance. Resistance was partial, temporary, incomplete. The stress remains active. The framework holds, but strain accumulates. Constitutional war authority. The Constitution assigns war initiation to Congress, command authority to the President. That distinction is foundational. It is not symbolic. It governs sequence. Authorization precedes force. Force follows consent. Modern practice reverses this order. Statutes attempt correction. The War Powers Resolution is one such attempt. Its effectiveness depends on compliance. Compliance was contested. Authority became interpretive. Executive power expanded through practice. Legislative power contracted through delay. Authorization debates occurred after deployment. That timing matters. It reframes consent as endorsement or obstruction. The authority question became abstract, not operational. Without explicit justification, boundaries blur. Emergency claims remain undefined. Defensive rationales are unstated. Authority expands by silence. Constitutional text remains fixed. Practice evolves around it. Enforcement requires political will. Will fluctuates. Authority drifts. The dispute remains unresolved. It persists across administrations. Each instance adds weight. The balance shifts incrementally. without formal adjudication, without statutory reform. The authority question remains open, active, unsettled. Executive accountability gap. Accountability depends on explanation. Explanation enables review. Review enables correction. In this case, explanation was absent. Authority was not articulated. Legal grounding was not disclosed. Strategy was not defined. This created a gap between action and justification, a gap between power and responsibility. Institutions rely on records. Records require answers. Without answers, accountability becomes symbolic. Oversight mechanisms lose precision. Hearings lack substance. Votes lack context. The gap widens over time. It is not abrupt. It accumulates. Each refusal reinforces it. Each delay entrenches it. Executive action proceeds. Legislative response lags. Accountability becomes retrospective, often incomplete. The system assumes good faith. That assumption was tested. The gap exposed dependence on voluntary compliance. Compliance was limited. Enforcement options remained indirect. Political costs altered behavior. Formal sanctions did not follow. The gap persisted. It became structural, not episodic. It shaped future expectations. It recalibrated norms. Silence became permissible. Explanation became optional. Accountability weakened through process, not decree. Institutional power clash. The clash unfolded across branches. It was procedural, not rhetorical. Authority claims overlapped. Congress asserted authorization rights. The executive asserted operational discretion. Neither conceded. Votes replaced dialogue. Pressure replaced negotiation. The clash revealed asymmetry. One branch acts unilaterally. The other relies on collective action. Collective action fragments. Timing matters. Action creates facts. Facts constrain response. The clash was uneven. Tools were available. Appropriations, hearings, subpoenas. They were not fully deployed. Political alignment intervened. Institutional loyalty competed with party loyalty. The clash remained unresolved. No court intervened. No statute was amended. No settlement emerged. The conflict persisted in parallel. Operations continued. Oversight stalled. The clash shifted power incrementally, not decisively. It revealed how authority contests evolve. Through delay, through pressure, through normalization, the clash did not end. It moved forward unresolved, embedded in practice, awaiting the next trigger. The episode revealed clear legal fractures. Authorization was contested. Explanation was withheld. Oversight was delayed. Process failed before policy was even evaluated. The war powers framework was triggered, but not enforced. Congressional authority was asserted, then blunted. Executive action proceeded without articulated legal grounding. That gap remains unresolved. It weakens accountability. It normalizes unilateral sequencing. It shifts power through silence rather than law. The systemic failure is cumulative, not singular. Each instance where force precedes consent recalibrates expectations. Each refusal to explain narrows oversight capacity. If this pattern continues, war authorization risks becoming retrospective formality, not prior consent. That is the warning. The system does not collapse suddenly. It erodes incrementally, through precedent, through inaction, through normalization of imbalance. This confrontation is not closed. It will recur. Through funding battles, through hearings, through future deployments. How Congress responds next will define whether this was an exception or a model. For continued analysis grounded in law, institutions, and power, subscribe to the channel. Stay informed. Stay focused on process. That is where governance either holds or fails.